You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another episode of Red Eye Responds. Today we'll be taking a look at a two-part video covering Family Guy scary theories. I thought that was a cringy enough topic to look into, so let's look into it. And this comes from a channel called Most Amazing Top 10, which sounds like the best channel name ever made. And totally doesn't sound like a generic Watch Mojo clone that are a dime a dozen.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Most Amazing Top 10. I'm your host, Chade Arena.
Really going for that Bob Ross look. I respect that.
If you're a 90s or 2000 baby, then you definitely grew up watching Seth MacFarlane's masterpiece, Family Guy.
I think this is quite literally the first and only time I've ever heard Family Guy referred to as a masterpiece. And like I said, I love the show, but I would never in a million years call Family Guy a masterpiece.
There's some people out there that would argue that Family Guy is actually better than The Simpsons.
I don't believe such people exist, but if they do, I don't want to meet them.
Number 10, Family Guy called out Kevin Spacey.
Okay, yeah, I was actually telling my friends about this just the other day as I was rewatching Family Guy. There's a scene where Stewie runs out and starts yelling, "I escaped," like he runs around naked yelling, "I escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement," or something to that effect, right? And I was like, damn, that's kind of topical. Like, that's kind of ironic that this came out all these years before. So yeah, this one I also was like, that's interesting. Like, I don't think that it necessarily proves anything, that, like, you know, Seth MacFarlane had any sort of knowledge, although I wouldn't doubt that rumors of Kevin Spacey were probably passed around in Hollywood long before the actual accusations came out and before all of that came to light.
All know about the once beloved star of Game of Cards who...
So if you know about it, why are you saying the wrong title? It's House of Cards. He's mixing Game of Thrones with House of Cards to call it Game of Cards because he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
Turned out to be a horrible person behind closed doors, doing all sorts of creepy things to people. I'm not going into detail about it, but if you're watching House of Cards and you have no idea...
So you do know the title of the show. Was that just a slip-up that you couldn't fix in editing? I mean, to be fair, I'm not going to criticize wholeheartedly for that because I leave some mistakes in all the time. But this is a much bigger channel than me. This is just one of those corporate channels that just shit stuff out non-stop, which... with, you know, as big of a channel they are, they should probably have some sort of quality control. I'm not going to harp on them too much for that because, again, I'm very much just kind of lazy when it comes to shit like that myself, but still.
Family Guy did a small joke in one episode that seemed to be calling Kevin Spacey out for all the gross crap he was doing.
Yeah, again, it was literally just a one-scene joke where Stewie runs out naked yelling that he escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement.
So it seemed like maybe a few people knew what was going on with Kevin Spacey when no one was looking, but nobody had the balls to call him out except for the people at Family Guy. It makes you want to look through every celebrity reference that there ever was to see if they're all true.
Okay, so as I said, I wouldn't doubt that rumors of Kevin Spacey were probably passed around in Hollywood long before it became public. But I wouldn't go so far as to say, you know, everyone knew about it at the time. It was just rumors at the time, which at the time were unsubstantiated. Obviously, things are different now. There's a lot more to it now. I don't think that, I don't think that everyone was just, like, afraid to talk. Maybe they were. Maybe you're right. Maybe they were. I don't know. But I just feel like maybe some people didn't want to talk unless they had evidence, and nobody did at the time would be my assumption. And I think it's idiotic to try and say, look back at every celebrity rumor in Family Guy to say that's true, because, you know, a lot of them are physically impossible. Like Kelly Ripa being some sort of, like, you know, monster that eats people's faces and stuff. Or, I mean, that's a joke one, obviously, but, or like Ben Stiller with his ears flying. Obviously also a joke one. I'm sure he means more the realistic, feasible ones. But no, I sincerely doubt there would be any truth to a lot of them.
Number 9, Brian is Seth MacFarlane.
This one doesn't really belong on this list because it's not scary and it's totally true. So, if you don't know, Brian is very clearly Seth MacFarlane's, you know, self-insert type character. He's not literally, in the most literal sense, Seth MacFarlane, but he is the author representation within the work, which most stories tend to have. Brian being the representation of Seth MacFarlane, true, not really a conspiracy theory, and not scary, so it doesn't belong on this list.
Now, out of all the characters that Seth voices, Brian is the only one that he doesn't change his voice for.
False. Not true. There are several side characters who just have his normal voice. Completely false.
He is one of the only characters on the show who seems to be a fully functioning person.
Well, dog, but yeah, still.
He shows empathy. He's easily the smartest person on the show, and
he thinks he's the smartest person on the show. He's really just pretentious, and that's kind of the point of him. Quagmire even calls him out on this in an excellent speech in Jerome is the New Black. No, Brian's not the smartest person on the show. I mean, maybe comparatively, but there's plenty of characters that I think are in his league, if not miles above him, like Stewie. Stewie invents all sorts of crazy shit, and while Stewie himself has some, you know, childlike naivety because he's, you know, a baby, I'd say that Stewie is way smarter than Brian, and Bertram is probably way smarter than Brian too, because he also builds, like, inventions and stuff.
At times he seems to be so self-aware he knows he's in a TV show.
Literally every main character of Family Guy has at one point known that they were in a TV show because they break the fourth wall all the time, so this is a moot point.
Quahog is a science experiment. Why do so many weird things keep happening in the Griffins' hometown of Quahog?
Because it's a cartoon.
Well, it's because the show is meant to be an over-the-top comedy that will sometimes push things to the absurd to make a joke.
Exactly.
Well, that's the logical answer, but we're not here for that. We want weird conspiracy theories about the show's lore. Well, one is that the whole town is a giant science experiment. How do you get so many weird things into a town and have people go through their lives like nothing's happening? You got talking dogs and babies, giant chickens that are ready to have insane fights at the drop of a hat, and how does a family afford to raise 3 kids when it seems like nobody ever works?
Okay, so first off, yeah, a bunch of crazy shit happens, but it's not just in Quahog. When they move to other towns, nobody questions Brian talking either. Like when they moved to that fictional town in the south, or when they moved to Texas. Nobody questioned Brian there either. Not to mention, Stool Bend, Virginia in the Cleveland show has Tim the Talking Bear, and that's not part of Quahog either. And on the fact that you say nobody ever works, that's just factually not true. Pretty much every member of the Griffin household has had a job at one point or another. In fact, even Stewie has. Stewie worked at Burger King for a while. Peter has had multiple jobs. He worked for Mr. Weed at the toy factory for the longest time. He worked on the boat catching fish, although didn't make really a lot of money doing that. And he works at the brewery. Lois has had jobs within the school. She's been the mayor for a short stint. And it's just, no, that's just factually not true. Chris works at the Quahog Mini Mart, where Meg has also worked before. So just, no, you're wrong. The entire Griffin family has worked, and many of them still do.
It could be a giant government experiment, or maybe everyone's stuck in purgatory.
So the experiment thing was already feeling like a ripoff of the SpongeBob Bikini Bottom theory, but now you're just throwing the purgatory thing in there like every fucking show has, because the purgatory theory is just like, oh, well, maybe they're in purgatory. What's next? Are you gonna say they're in a coma? No. These are the most boring and overused theories that you could apply to literally anything, and they don't work when you think about it logically.
Number 7. Peter is in love with Lois in real life.
So there are two things about that. Number one, obviously Peter's not a real person. Obviously he's talking about Seth MacFarlane and Alex Borstein. But I think this is stupid because this is just, attempts at celebrity gossip. And it's not scary either. Again, these are supposed to be scary conspiracy theories, so this is just fucking stupid and doesn't belong on the list.
Number 6. The whole show is someone's imagination.
No, I'm just not going to address this theory. These are the laziest theories there are. It's all in their imagination, and they're almost always wrong. Like the Rugrats theory, Ash is in a coma theory is kind of the same thing. The only time that the imagination thing really works for me is Courage the Cowardly Dog. But even then, I'd say that's not true. And the coma one, the only show I would say it works is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because there's literally an episode dedicated to that. I know he's not talking about the coma thing, but they kind of go hand in hand. So no, it's a lazy, stupid theory. I'm not even going to fucking address the whole thing.
5. The Griffins have been using Stewie to get super rich. How does one middle-class family living in New England do so many extravagant things? I mean, in one episode, there can be more fireworks, backup dancers, and costume changes than a Lizzo concert. They also have access to technology that is far beyond the grasp of someone working a 9-to-5. While the way the Griffins might be able to live such a life of excess is because they've been using Stewie. In the episode A Picture's Worth $1,000, Stewie becomes a Calvin Klein model, and ever since then, it seems that money has been no problem for the Griffins.
I'll admit they have a lot of unrealistic stuff that they shouldn't be able to afford. Money is often a problem for the Griffins, and they get made fun of by the rich, particularly Carter Pewterschmidt, all the time. So just no, this theory is kind of dumb. They have this shit because it's a cartoon. That's plain and simple. And once again, this isn't a particularly scary theory, so it doesn't fit in with this list.
Trust me, I'm in that world, and I'm not getting a helicopter with my face on it in the near future. I mean, it's in my 5-year plan. Like, I'm not a peasant. I'm just saying I couldn't buy one tomorrow.
No, not funny.
4. Brian used to be a human. How does a dog get such an expensive taste for alcohol without spending time as a depressed man who needs to drown his sorrows?
Because it's a cartoon.
This theory is backed up by a little bit of a crossover. There isn't just one Seth MacFarlane cartoon, but there are many. One of them being American Dad. In the show, there's a little perverted, possibly Nazi-affiliated fish named Klaus. Now, Klaus used to be a German skier, but the CIA took his brain and put it into a fish's body, which...
See, this is something I could agree with you on if it wasn't for the fact that Brian has a cousin who's also just like he is and is also a dog. His cousin Jasper is a talking dog as well. And there's been other talking dog characters such as Vinny and New Brian, so I still don't buy into this. Like Klaus, yeah, Klaus used to be human, he was a Nazi, and his brain was put into a fish. That's already established in American Dad. But the only reason that Stan would have access to that is because he works for the CIA. Peter doesn't do that, so it just doesn't work.
3. A show within a show. Oh my god, you guys, we're gonna get into showception. It's gonna be like Inception, but with 0 famous people or special effects or big budget or Christopher Nolan. It's gonna be like the real thing, except nothing like it. Well,
Not funny.
Well, now that I'm done with that weird rant, this theory is that Family Guy is actually a TV show within the American Dad TV show, or American Dad is a show within the Family Guy TV show.
Okay, no. I figure he's just gonna use the logic of, Family Guy appearing on the TV in American Dad by Stan, watching the episode where Brian becomes Republican and saying, good for Brian. But no, that's not the case, because they've actually had characters interact with each other and meet each other from both shows. So no, it just doesn't work. It's a cartoon, and they use cartoon logic, or lack thereof. And once again, this theory is not scary.
Stewie isn't Lois's son. Oh baby, get Maury on the phone, we gotta get to the bottom of this. So this is some hot Family Guy gossip I pulled from the interweb, that Stewie isn't Lois's kid, but might be Meg's kid. That Meg got pregnant and she was either too scared or didn't want to get an abortion, but Lois was being a good mom and wanted to save her the stardom followed by humiliation that comes with being a star on Teen Mom.
Okay, so I'm sure that this was not being literal, but you're not going to be on Teen Mom just because you are a teen mom, so that was kind of a bad joke that didn't really work, because it didn't really come across as a joke in my opinion. This is literally a joke from Partial Terms of Endearment, the band episode, where Lois tells Meg she couldn't handle another baby because Meg's body was destroyed giving birth to Stewie. But that was a joke to freak Stewie out. And then Lois says, "No, I'm just kidding," and he's like, "Oh, not cool." So no, this is just a joke. So no, it's not a conspiracy theory. And once again, it is not scary.
Family Guy predicted Paul Walker's death.
I'm not even going to really touch on this one that much, because that's just kind of distasteful in my opinion. But no, the shows predict shit all the time and get lucky with it. To say, oh, this is a scary theory. No, it's just a unfortunate coincidence that The Simpsons has run into multiple times, obviously, as have many other shows. I'm just not going to really give this one that much airtime, just because I feel like it's kind of in bad taste. Alright, now on to the second video. So part 2. 10 more Family Guy scary theories. And once again, let's see how much of these are actually scary, am I right?
Probably the only show that has ever been able to compete with Simpsons when it comes to being the top dog of animated late night.
No, I would say South Park, Archer, hell, even Rick and Morty, even though that show has a terrible fan base and Season 3 was lackluster. I haven't even bothered with Season 4. I would say just in sheer popularity, absolutely it's competed. So no, far from the only show.
Family Guy has now reached the point that the show is so deep that people have started making theories about what's happening behind the scenes that the writers don't tell us.
I would not call Family Guy deep. That is one thing I would not use to describe it. Also, I can't tell if it's just because you're wearing the hat, but you're not going for the Bob Ross look anymore? What's wrong?
Today's list of top 10 scary Family Guy theories. Coming in at number 10, we have Chris Griffin will be a serial killer.
Interesting start. Okay, I'll hear you out. Let's see what he has to say.
Now, there is an episode where Chris recreates a famous scene from Silence of the Lambs where Buffalo Bill is dancing in front of the mirror naked with a large scarf. For anyone who hasn't seen Silence of the Lambs, Buffalo Bill is a serial killer who kidnaps young girls, puts them in a hole in the ground, makes them put lotion on their skin so he can later use it to make dresses. Yeah, it's pretty messed up. But
okay, so just because they do an homage to a serial killer film doesn't mean they're going to be a serial killer. Cartman did a similar thing where he enacted a scene where he acted as Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. In addition to that, Jay from Clerks has done the tuck dance from Silence of the Lambs before. And minor nitpick, but no, it wasn't to make dresses, it was to make a woman's suit, as in to look like a woman. Essentially, he was creating a female bodysuit he could put on and become a woman in a sense.
It goes a little deeper than just a gag from the movie. Seth Green, who voices the character of Chris, actually based the voice on Buffalo Bill.
Again, just because the voice was a basis of something doesn't mean anything.
But how far are the writers willing to take this relation? Maybe on one episode we'll see into the character's futures and we might see that Chris has a basement full of bodies.
No, we've already seen into the future and Chris is actually a cop, so kind of the opposite. And again, that's literally all he has to base it on is, oh, he did the voice because of Buffalo Bill, and oh, he did the Buffalo Bill dance, therefore he will be a serial killer. If Chris had, like, a history of torturing animals or something like that, I'd give you this one. But no, there's no correlation whatsoever. This is just fucking stupid.
Coming in at number 9, we have Brian is a god. Now, not like a real god. You don't go to church every Sunday to pray to an animated dog, but that he is the god of the Family Guy universe. There are a couple of things that point towards this. Brian is a dog, but he lives life as a human.
Once again, as I keep saying, It's a cartoon. There's other anthropomorphic animals in the Family Guy universe, including Tim the Bear, New Brian, Brian's cousin Jasper, the giant chicken and his wife, Klaus, which, like we said, Klaus used to be human. But the point is, I could go on and on. There are plenty of anthropomorphic animals, so no, that's a poor choice. Let's see if he has any other evidence. We'll give him a chance.
I mean, sure, he does do some things that dogs do, but he also drinks, parties, dates, falls in and out of love, and everything else that every other human character on the show can do. On top of this, he's voiced by the creator of the show, Seth MacFarlane, and Seth uses his natural speaking voice to talk as Brian. So the idea of Brian being the god of the Family Guy universe is that Seth is projecting himself into the show and living through the character.
Okay, now you're just reusing the theory from the previous one about Seth MacFarlane being Brian, which, as I said, wasn't a theory, because it's just, a self-insert. That's pretty clearly what it is. And on top of that, no, that's not scary either. And it also doesn't prove he's a god. And if it did, that's kind of narcissistic, don't you think? And that's literally it. There's no more evidence he gives for this. It's a terrible theory.
Coming in at number 8, Peter and Lois will get divorced.
That doesn't sound very scary either. This is not living up to the name, just like the last one.
But many of the fans have speculated that Family Guy might be the first show to do it and stick with it.
It wouldn't be the first one to do it, because Homer and Marge did get a divorce in an episode which was not canon. It was some stupid thing about a story behind a tattoo on a lady's back in an alternate universe. But, to follow through with it, no, The Simpsons did not. Obviously, that episode wasn't canon. Also, Rick and Morty had Jerry and Beth get divorced, so there you go.
The theory is that they might have a spin-off series starring Lois. It would be a dramatic change for the show, but they have experimented with spin-off shows before. We had the Cleveland Show that took Cleveland back to his hometown to raise a family, and American Dad isn't really a spin-off, but the two shows reference each other quite a bit.
Again, I'm not seeing any evidence with what you're saying. You're just saying things. Where's the actual thing that sparked this theory? Because Lois and Peter, in all honesty, are not that confrontational with each other. They've had episodes where they've had struggles. Usually Lois just kind of looks the other way with Peter's stupid scheme, so I'm not seeing a lot of evidence here. I don't get it. And that's literally all he has to say is, hey, shows have fat guys married to wives. They fight. They could do a spin-off. That's it. Like he says, oh, they could potentially do a spin-off, so there's a theory. There's a new theory. That's just a theory. No. That's just you making up a bunch of shit based on nothing.
Coming in at number 7, we have There Is a Family Guy Multiverse.
I'm not even going to give credit to this one. I'm not even going to watch the rest of this theory. Because there is. That's already proven. Road to the multiverse. Back to the multiverse. They are things.
Coming in at number 6, we have Stewie is the clone of an evil genius. Now, who this genius is yet to be pinpointed. Some people think that it's a Nazi scientist from the past, and other people say that it's someone from the future.
Again, this is just more speculating and pulling shit out of people's asses. There's nothing to back this, just that Stewie himself is a genius. And that really shows because he was descended from Leonardo da Vinci. See, when they said clone, I thought they were going to go with, the thing with evil Stewie, which actually does make sense because there was an episode with evil Stewie, which has an ending that's kind of a callback to Thriller that implies that evil Stewie is the one that lived. So this whole, oh, he's a clone of some random evil genius, it's lazy and it doesn't work.
Number 5, we have the whole show takes place in Peter's psychosis.
Once again, this is kind of like it was all their imagination or purgatory or coma theory. It's lazy, overdone, and doesn't work, so I'm just gonna skip it.
Coming in at number 4, we have the same dinner theory. I don't know if you guys have realized this, but the Griffin family sits down to eat the same food every night.
Welcome to cartoons. Have you noticed that in the early Simpsons episodes, they are always eating purple goop? Also, how is this scary? Again, this list does not have a single scary thing.
Go through and watch a bunch of episodes of Family Guy. Every time it's dinner, they eat the same 3 things: mashed potatoes, some roast beef, and what looks like a pile of peas. That is because they have been forced to act out the show because they are prisoners. The whole show takes place in a basement on a set that someone constructed. He kidnapped a family to make them act out a sitcom in his home.
Man, the levels of reach on this are ridiculous. This doesn't make any sense. What the fuck are you on about? Yeah, they eat the same dinner all the time, so the natural conclusion is they're prisoners and forced to make a show. And the show within a show thing was already a theory he talked about in the previous video, so it's just getting lazy again.
Number 3, we have Joe Swanson can walk.
He can sometimes, depends on the episode, but no, overall, no, he cannot. There's been episodes where that's been the focus, where he could, but this is not a thing that is consistent. He cannot walk. That is his whole character. Let's hear him out. Let's see what his reasoning is, but yeah.
He's super fit, he works as a cop, and some fans have speculated that it's all a trick, that he's been able to walk this whole time, and the cop in a wheelchair thing is just an act.
One of the things that contradicts this is even if he could before, the episode where he gets the transplant and can walk ends with him getting shot by Bonnie and crippled again. So you actually see him get crippled in the current timeline when Bonnie shoots him in the legs. Bonnie couldn't finish him off with it, so he had to shoot himself in the spine, but the point is, he crippled himself at the end of that episode. So even if you were right, which you're clearly not, about Joe being able to walk previously, because if he could, he wouldn't have got that transplant and actually gone through that whole character arc of becoming a douche. Even if you were right, which you weren't, he was crippled after that.
Joe secretly works for the CIA and has been stationed to be Peter and Lois's neighbor so he can keep an eye on all the crazy things that they're doing all the time.
Ah yes, he works for the CIA, and to cover, he has to not walk. No, otherwise he wouldn't have had the episode where he could walk for a while, if that was somehow integral to his cover, which makes no goddamn sense to me anyway.
2, we have the chicken is Death. Now
No, because Death is already a character in the show. You might say that here in a second, but no, Death is a character in the fucking show.
I know that Death has shown up on the show before.
Exactly. There was many episodes dedicated to him, so why?
And has hung out with Peter and the other members of his family. But some people think that the representation of Death that we have seen on the show isn't actually Death.
If that were the case, why would him getting injured and not being able to go out and kill people affect the fact that people couldn't die? You're just wrong.
Some sort of godly figure that is extremely powerful, but whenever it shows up, it teaches Peter a lesson. It doesn't really take him to the afterlife.
No, but it did stop actual death from happening when he was injured. So the point is, yes, he is real Death, and he kills plenty of other people when he touches them, like that one girl that he tried to date who he killed because she was very preachy about, like, animal rights.
The chicken, on the other hand, has worked very hard to try and kill Peter.
Trying to kill Peter specifically would not make him Death, because plenty of people die in the show. Why would he single out one person like that? If he was Death, why would it be so difficult? And why would Peter win almost every fight they're in?
But Peter seems to be unkillable. That is why the chicken wants him so bad. Death wants the one soul that will not give itself up to him.
Do you just, like, come up with a bunch of shit and then try to just explain it with nothing? Because that's what you keep doing. It's a cartoon. Hello. Like, there's been plenty of characters that get hit in all sorts of ways that would normally kill people, but don't. It's not just Peter, it's not just the Griffin family, so I don't know what the fuck you are getting at with this.
At number 1, we have Family Guy was created through an act of God. This is one of the craziest theories about Family Guy that I can find, and that is why it has the sweet number 1 spot. I don't know if you guys know this about Family Guy, but the creator of the show, Seth MacFarlane, was supposed to be on one of the flights that ended up crashing into the World Trade Center.
I did not know that. Very interesting. This theory seems like it's going to be baseless as well, but very interesting.
The reason he missed the flight is because he was so hungover that he didn't make it to the airport in time.
Yeah, that sounds like Seth MacFarlane. I'm not knocking at the guy, but that sounds like Seth MacFarlane.
They think that it was God's plan. Shout out to Drake.
That would be incredibly ironic, since I'm pretty sure Seth MacFarlane is an atheist.
God made sure Seth would live so he could make Family Guy. People even go as deep to say that there are hidden messages from the big man upstairs in the show.
That is the most retarded thing I have heard all day. What? I don't know how much of this I can take. This is getting really fucking crazy and far-fetched.
So if you want God to save your life, you just gotta write a really good spec script. Alright everyone, that has been our list.
Yeah, the second list was worse than the first one. I don't think a single one of those theories was quote-unquote scary. And no, just no to all of that. This was awful. This is a terrible experience. So thank you for wasting my time, most amazing top 10s. I couldn't expect anything less. Toodles.
Dad, you want some Twizzlers?
No!
God, they're really good.
No!
That's